They thought that marijuana growing was going to be illegal because that's who does it, and it'd be dangerous and dirty. Instead, I was like, actually, the whole point of regulating is to get away from that. If you wait for the regs to be written, then you're in the race with everybody. People might put an online review saying, I didn't like XYZ from some vendor, because we don't just sell our own. But I love the tweed store. I love the Tokyo Smoke. The people knew what they're talking about. The layout was great. It was like Apple for weed. The biggest risk in life is having a job. And the reason is somebody else can fire you. So if you don't like that risk profile, figure out a way to create your own thing.
Welcome to The Naked Entrepreneur, where we delve into the minds behind groundbreaking businesses and the stories of entrepreneurship that redefine industries. In today's episode, we're excited to feature a pioneer of the cannabis industry, a visionary leader who saw potential where others only saw controversy. Meet Bruce Linton, the founder and former CEO of Canopy Growth Corporation, Canada's first publicly traded cannabis company and a global titan in the marijuana industry. Bruce's journey with Canopy Growth began with the belief that cannabis could be cultivated and sold responsibly, transforming perceptions and laws around the world. Under his guidance, Canopy Growth expanded rapidly, setting the standard for innovation, quality, and compliance in the burgeoning cannabis market. Bruce's entrepreneurial spirit didn't just stop with cannabis. Bruce's ventures span across various sectors, always with a focus on innovation and social responsibility. Beyond business, Bruce is known for his commitment to mental health initiatives, environmental sustainability, and advancing cannabis research. As a speaker, advisor, and serial entrepreneur, Bruce Linton continues to inspire with his forward-thinking approach to business and society. Join us now as we explore the highs and lows of Bruce Linton's remarkable journey at the forefront of the cannabis revolution.
Welcome to The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm Dr. Sean Wise, and today I'm joined by Bruce Linton, founder, chairman, and CEO of Canopy Growth Corporation, the world's leading diversified cannabis company. Canopy Growth operates a collection of diverse brands, which include Tweed and Spectrum. Bruce Linton recently made Bloomberg's Top 50 People of 2018. He's recently been crowned with the title, the Marijuana CEO. Canopy became the first publicly traded cannabis company in North America and the first to reach $10 billion in market value. His stake is estimated to be worth about $62 million, and if you add in stock options, his fortune rises to more than $75 million. Canopy Growth has a 27% market share of the national market for medical marijuana, and the company is expected to generate more than $300 million in sales. Recently, they've won the Telfer Private Sector Leadership Award in Advanced Technology, and Bruce himself was named CEO of the Year by the Best Ottawa Business Awards. Bruce, thank you for coming in.
Hey, good to see you, man.
Now, we have to start where we always start, which is full disclosure. You and I know each other from college, so let's start there.
That's true.
It's 20 years ago, a little more now maybe, 25 years ago, and you are student union president. What did you learn from being so active at a college level that you took later into business?
Yeah. So I didn't get involved with student politics because of the politics part, like not at all.
Okay. What drove you to get involved in student politics?
I had this idea that Frosh Week, the first week of the school, was the most important week. If you had a great first week, you could say you're half done a great first year.
I would agree.
And so I put a lot of time into that. And when I saw the person who'd been the president when I was in first year, I thought I could be the president because he was a short, red-haired guy that got drunk in a bar and didn't get thrown out because he was president. I thought that sounds like a perfectly good job for me. And so I kept it in the back of my mind, and I got involved with a lot of stuff. But when I ran, what I thought about was, what will increase the likelihood of everybody who comes here graduating? And how do we, as a students' association, do that? Because it's good business and it's the good thing to do.
To have people actually finish their degree.
Right. Because we get paid fees as a students' association per year you attend, and the reputation of the university goes up by the number of people who complete it versus the people who don't.
Correct.
And so I kind of in the back of my head said, how does that become the outcome of my year? And so we put a lot more money into, Frosh Week, but we also finished up things like having a pharmacy on campus. We really tried to get speakers in that caused a lot of headaches for people because that engaged them. The year prior, they had the founder of Hustler magazine come in and speak. And we were big supporters of having that go. We paid for it up. And it wasn't that we actually agreed with them, but we thought having a debate.
That's the purpose of university,
right.
to different ideas. Different
and so,
thoughts.
all that stuff went on. And it really what it turned into is it took me 6 years to do a 4-year degree. And I concluded that, there's no racing through things in life. There's no, it's an education, not a race. So as I went at it, I've been an entrepreneur and tried things 5-6 times now. And the whole Carleton thing just taught me that, I was a not very good high school student. By taking my time there, I actually figured out how academics work. And I wasn't an academic, but I wasn't stupid. So when I went out, my first job, of course, was working in a high-tech company making things called multiplexers because I graduated from economics and public policy. It was a completely logical jump. But it was all possible because being involved. Mm-hmm. And
being engaged and being networked and learning those personal skills.
You have no clue what leads to what.
Okay.
But I can tell you if you're not engaged and participating, it leads to zero.
So engagement is a way to put yourself out there.
Yeah, we were chatting off camera. I just had lunch with a gentleman. We agreed on a bunch of sort of principles of how things work. But a lot of times, if you're going to try and do something, whoever you're going to work with, right? I showed up today because it was your name on it, right?
You have a relationship.
A relationship, but it's integrity. And then the next thing, is you want to know that you're going to go to some counterparty there's intelligence. And then the final thing that works in terms of how you keep in touch with people or achieve anything is you got to have a mutual passion towards things.
Okay.
And there's no one who's met you or has met me that would argue that we don't have those three things.
Intelligence, my wife might argue, but the other two I have.
You can belittle and joke, but ultimately, an engagement that's durable has to have those three ingredients. And it doesn't matter if it's in your personal life or your business life or anything. And so I think a lot of those things sort of become present at university and have held to be very true through everything else.
Now, you've had quite a journey. It's an exciting and busy time for you. Marijuana was just legalized a few months ago, and you personally made history. I remember opening the paper the next day and giving you a virtual high five, because you personally looked like you made the first legal sale of Canada in the post-recreational world. Yeah. What did that mean to you? It had been a long road up until that point. When you started, recreational wasn't even an idea. Medical was just coming into its forefront after the Supreme Court decisions. But what did that moment in time mean for you?
Right, so there's a whole bunch of ways you got to look at this. First, how did making sure that happened benefit the business? Mm-hmm. You saw us on the front page of the paper.
Everyone saw you on the front page.
You decided when you're going to a store, you might buy some. Better than 50-50 chance you're going to buy the one you know. Mm-hmm. How do you know that one? Earned media. So that was one of the check boxes. Second thing, what did it do? It opened all of our eyes. Like, being there meant we experienced what that meant to so many people. And it was surprising to me because when you're trying to execute it, you have time to actually notice, okay, this person's emotional. That person is crying. And it's because it's unburdening things. But you also then have to return to the fact that I'm going to transact something on a system that's never sold anything before in about 4 minutes. I'm going to have a pretty young person, maybe 21, 22, as the primary car holder on what happens. And I know when I was 21, 22, if my credit card worked, it was kind of a euphoric, positive experience.
Sort of 50-50, whether you were at the limit or not.
At the best. And so there was the experience what others were having, make sure we get the good media. Holy crap, is that person's credit card going to work? And then it comes back to it, is this going to turn into a media disaster?
Because anytime you put yourself out there, it can go wrong.
Right. So, when you think about it, you got to have the upside, but you got to have downside protection. And in that case, my downside protection is I had 4 other credit cards from other people sitting under the counter. And so a credit card was for sure going to work. Fortunately, hers worked. But so that kind of is how, as an entrepreneur, you're trying to say, how do I keep grabbing the spot that is going to matter the most? And then when you get to that spot, you realize there's a fair bit of risk, because we actually had in Newfoundland, so the most easterly city in Canada, in St. John's, we had CNBC, we had CNN, we had CBC.
I thought I saw BBC was there.
BBC. we had, run down the list. They were all there. And so it could have been the first insufficient funds transaction, credit card failed.
That went around the world.
Right, or our software, like we tested this shit, but it's like the first live sale. So it's kind of a big deal. I felt, frankly, materially better after the transaction concluded than I did before. And the interesting part was, I thought for the journalists there, they felt like maybe this was their event, like the Berlin Wall.
This was the moment in time when things changed.
This will be one or two things in their career. They'll say, I was there. And it was interesting because they bought quite a lot of marijuana after the first few orders because they were on the inside. And they got me signing stuff.
Like signing like...
Yeah, signing bags, signing hats, signing containers. And so when journalists go from that function
to the fan,
I'm part of this now, that means it's a material event. And so that kind of put it all in context for me.
And what does it mean for you personally to see that loop close, to start 6-7 years ago with the concept, to jump out in front, to establish yourself as a giant in the industry, to fight your way up, to be top of mind, and then to see it all come together? Because many entrepreneurs spend their whole life slaving away and never have that joyous moment. You've both been blessed to have seen it firsthand. What did it mean to you?
So for me, I didn't, I probably got to step up on the shoulders of many people who fought to have this happen because of moral or scientific knowledge. I didn't do that. What I did is I showed up and said, this has now got to be run in a certain way, which is very technical, and we put together that thought process. But what it really did for the actual topic is bias is ugly, really ugly. And so what I've found over the last 6 years is there's a lot of people who are really uninformed, biased, negative. And it's often not their fault, right? There's been
on this topic, there's been campaigns and propaganda for 70, 80 years run by the tobacco industry, run by the alcohol industry, run by the pharmaceutical. Nobody wants it.
So what I liked with the event was it kind of felt like one event that supported dig in and learn about fact. And it caused a conversation that I don't think stopped in Canada, and it's growing around the globe, which has happened at kitchen tables, which is, can we really talk what the hell this is about?
And what it does and
how
what
does it do? Like, how could it help our dog? How could it help you when you're old? What's going on with vaping? Why is vaping a bad idea for one thing, good for another? What's happening with cigarettes? What do you think about drinking? And
where does it all fit into the conversation?
Yeah, and those are the conversations that you can't really have with your kids and your parents and everybody until it's actually sort of registered as federally okay.
Well, you have a high schooler, and so I imagine you have a lot of tough conversations with him. But the schools, up until recently, weren't even able to discuss moderate, appropriate understanding. So it was, you can drink a little or abstain a lot, but abstain from sex, abstain from alcohol, abstain from drugs, as opposed to saying, this is going on, let's inform people intelligently.
Yeah.
Startup opportunities often come from change, regulatory change, demographic change, feelings around an issue. What do you think led up to this watershed change? Because it's a global change. You went from the Reagan 30 years ago, the war on drugs, and marijuana is as worse as cocaine, to we all kind of realizing that's just not true.
So the easiest way to phrase what happened is perception and reality were not in sync.
Okay.
So if perception and reality are not in sync, that means that there's a massive opportunity.
Okay.
And it's either up or down. But like, on this one...
Because eventually reality will catch perception or vice versa.
Right. And so the delta between those defines the size of the market based on what the topic is. And so cannabis is everywhere, so it's a giant market. And the perception was that you would probably go, it's devil's lettuce, you're going to die if you get near it. Reality is quite a lot different than that. And the reason we got to this massive delta was a multi-layered prohibitionist gong show.
Well, you said prohibition was the greatest asset
for me.
For you. So tell me what you mean by that.
But so like that, the prohibitionist barrier is this massive thing because the opportunity to explore what this plant could do, how you can convert it into medical or recreational or smoking cessation couldn't be pursued by any reasonable academic because it was a prohibited topic, which meant the substances couldn't be played with, they couldn't be accessed, they couldn't be sourced. And had that not been, this is already a phenomenal business. It was a good business 100 years ago. That got interrupted. And so prohibition just puts up this massive berm that holds back all kinds of reasonable investigation. And then when it breaks, it's a massive flow of potential, and you've got to figure out, am I at the front riding it?
Tell me about how you got interested in this as a field, as an opportunity.
Kind of like why I went to tech. So I was a graduate of economics and public policy, and of course went straight to work for a data networking company when that was a really big deal.
Yeah, in 95, 96.
Right. But the reason I went there is, as the gentleman who founded it explained to me, was public policy had changed. There had been a court ruling where basically monopoly suppliers could no longer dictate terms to customers, which meant that there were going to be the big guys and the little guys and the medium guys, and we're all going to war.
Yeah.
Which meant that if you were creating equipment, you had three categories of potential buyers killing each other.
To arm up.
And so when he described that, it sounded pretty interesting. When you try to describe how a multiplexer works, it's pretty boring. And so on this one, I just looked at the public policy. And it was really evident in Canada in 2012 that Mr. Harper was our prime minister. He's kind of a right-wing guy. Mm-hmm. And that the police were extremely unhappy with the current laws because their chiefs have said they couldn't enforce them. So in my mind, people who vote for right wings tend to have gray hair. People who like police have gray hair. He's going to make new rules. And he's going to govern this. And it just took a day of poking around to be really clear that they were going to govern it like a narcotic.
Yeah.
And so I went around and I asked several people, would you like to start this with me? And every one of the first four I asked said, horrific idea. Very bad idea.
Could I ask you, I know the answer personally, but could I ask you to share, what were they hanging that on?
So this is just the view that it's illegal, that it's marijuana, right? It's sort of like when people think when provinces run gaming commissions, somehow there's going to be money laundering, when in fact it's the most controlled money transaction on the planet. They thought that marijuana growing was going to be illegal because that's who does it, and it'd be dangerous and dirty. Instead, I was like, actually, the whole point of regulating is to get away from that. So the perception-reality gap's massive. As far as I could tell, there were quite a lot of people who like marijuana. So I should start one. And I think,
Do you remember the moment in time that you made the decision that you were going to double down, invest your time and efforts? Did you come home and tell your wife, your partner at home? Did you make a decision? Do you remember that?
I'm not really good at being disciplined about looking at things for months and months and months. So I'd read the paper in the morning. By the end of the day, I was starting a marijuana company. Because what I'd done is read the paper, went, holy shit. Called a bunch of people at Health Canada, got one guy who could actually meet with me for a coffee, went and looked at the websites and went, man, everybody's going to start one of these. And I said, I'm starting a marijuana company. It's going to be a really good thing. And, generally I come home with a lot of ideas. But what was surprised to me was then nobody else was doing it.
It was a wide open field when you started.
But nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to give me money to do it.
Well, see, as you know, we also had a business in the cannabis space, and we also ran into money issues and the issues of finding a staff. But the reason I heard, and more often than not, was government-regulated industries are a horror show. Now, I've always believed if you're on the right side of that line, then you can afford to comply, it's actually in your benefit.
It's hugely in your benefit. Do you think, I don't know, does your cell phone work? Your smartphone works because it's a government-regulated industry. Mm-hmm. And the people who have those licenses seem to do okay if they run their business properly. So I actually think standards, protocols, regulations benefit those that achieve compliance. And then there's a whole bunch of people who nip at your heels but never get there.
But one might argue that the path towards compliance, regulations that work, isn't always linear. That the government is not historically efficient at getting it right on the first time. And we both know that we would start building something, and then they would change the regs, and we would rip it out and start building again. So share with me the early days. You say now the prohibition was good, the compliance was good.
So
but you had full head of hair when you started with Health Canada.
So the problem really, the challenge, I don't think it's a problem, is if you wait for the regs to be written, then you're in the race with everybody. If you're willing to gamble and predict, if you're right, you got a big lead. And so at the beginning, I went and saw potential investors. I said, so the way it's going to work is I need at least $15 million.
1.5, yeah?
Yeah, and I spend that $1.5 million. I'm going to build out a securitized environment that's going to grow cannabis. But I can't do so until a government inspector comes with a clipboard. And they won't give us a license before we build it. They'll give us some guidance. So either we'll get a license or we'll grow tomatoes. We'll charge like $100 each per tomato. And that's the only second choice of recovering your capital. So we have to get a license. And that sounds terrible. But if you invert it and said the government's going to do this because the Prime Minister's office wants to.
And the Supreme Court requires it.
And so now the question only is this team competent and more probable to get a reward of getting it done right?
But you're assuming that everyone in the government would always work rationally and treat everyone
well,
that's not always the case.
No, but you got to differentiate between bureaucrats and politicians.
Got it.
And when it doesn't matter so much what the political party is in favor of or against, it's how they run. So under Mr. Harper, the political party was run from the Prime Minister's office. If he said do it, they were doing it. Mm-hmm. And so when this was clear that he was going to do it, Health Canada and others would do it. And so I thought our risk was reasonably low, and so we built it. And then we got a license. And each time, on my drive here, there was a material headache that, you got to discuss and talk. There's never a week, if you're an entrepreneur, that there aren't 10 problems that could actually derail a company when they're under a market cap of a couple $100 million, right? Once you're up at $1 billion, you start to have enough cash but there's that stage where people think, wow, we've made it, we're 100 people, we're 100 million. You can pretty quick become 10 people and dying fast. So, we were swinging vine to vine to vine.
Trying to avoid the alligators.
Yeah, and until the material change for us was November 1, when you get a $5 billion cash infusion, now you just want to put your head down and execute on the plan because you don't have to spend 60% of your time continually finding capital.
Let's talk about that infusion. Up until that point, you, your board, your teams, your stakeholders, you guys were driving. Now along comes an entity, arm's length, with 100 years experience and valuable experience in an adjacent field, but a lot, they're not dumb people. You can learn a lot from them. And they offer you what you and I would have thought years ago was an exorbitant size of a check. It's a $5 billion, which means your company's at least worth that because they're not taking half, so maybe it's cash. And is that the validity? I mean, we try to tell our students that closing a round of funding isn't success. It's the fuel to drive success.
100%.
But you pick up a $5 billion check in an industry that 5 years ago no one would look at you. The banks laughed at us, both you and I, when we tried to get them on side. Oh, we have U.S. assets. We would never do that. Look now, they're also quick to do it. But you, unlike my team, you swung for the fences every time. You never went small. You went out to raise a large amount to be the Molsons, the Coors, the Labatts of this industry, where we were much more Canadian and focused and quiet. What made you choose that strategy? It wasn't a choice even.
Well, it wasn't really a choice. So it starts with, when you read the rules, our license was attached to an address because an address can't move, which means I can't move my license to be beside a school or inside a nursing home. So in my mind, my address was my license. If I was going to be regulated by Health Canada, I probably had $2 or $3 million of overhead with turn lights on each year. So I should have a really big address. So my starter site was 500,000 square feet.
Now, tell us about the starter site, because it's a great story.
So that was my starter site. So right off the bat, I'm in the deep end.
Yeah, because you have all that square footage.
Right, and once you start doing that, build out's costly. So we did 14 rounds of finance. We raised over $1 billion, almost $1.5 billion before that check came in, and did it and deployed almost all of it. And so by the time we got to the bigger check, it wasn't really a question of, are we doing the right things? Yes. Are we doing it the right way? Yes. Are our ambitions global? For sure. And so that cash really just is a process to focus and do it. But the building that I started in, it used to be the Hershey factory for all of Canada.
Now, that's significant for a lot of reasons, but one of them was that factory employed a sizable number, a percentage of that community in...
About 10%.
Okay.
Of all the community. Not when you say there's 7,000 people, that includes kids and really old people.
Yeah.
This place employed almost 700 people.
And then it didn't.
Zero.
And then the town loses that and it sits there.
Yeah, so I would say in a weird way, the best thing that happened to Smiths Falls is that the Hershey plant closed. And there weren't a lot of people who viewed it that way when it happened. Because now we employ over 800 there, but it's no longer a factory. It was the Hershey factory. Don't forget the factory word. And when it's a factory, that means a lot of people go to work and it's not fun, it's a factory. When you go to work at a marijuana facility that's trying to change the world, it doesn't feel much like a factory.
No, I imagine. What does it feel like to you?
Yeah, it feels kind of like you're at a tech company. We have a bunch of people collabing in the lobby, and then science in the back.
Okay,
And so what happened is the town was kind of down for quite a while, lost everything. That factory drove other things out. And then we came in, and the commitment I made is I'll try to 100 people. Well, the company now has 2,800 people across the world. It has 800 people at that location. Everybody who works for us gets equity options, which means the right to buy the shares in the future at today's price.
So they participate in the win.
Sure. So then the effect is they have more money. They buy houses that they wouldn't otherwise access, and then they put money into the house. So all of a sudden, all the tradespeople are busy in town. And so now...
So when you arrived, would you say you were welcomed with open arms? Did people see this possibly? Because when we opened in Peterborough, the mayor was very happy. But
yeah. Well, remember, I was sort of the first headline ever.
Very first.
The very first headline that town welcomes marijuana factory. And it was even more kind of, it was salacious, right? It was, how do we talk about marijuana? But when you say that I'm filling a chocolate factory with pot, and we try to give people on-ramps that were humor, so we explained, you know, I had to do it because I needed to understand why the Oompa Loompas were so happy. And it gives people an opening kind of how to, and then you can bring them on a journey. And so when we occupied the Hershey plant, we had 31 global stories about that. We were written up in Russian and Japanese. Wow. Within 4 months, Al Jazeera had cameras on site trying to understand what was going on. And
again, getting the spotlight, getting the name out
earned
there.
Media. Earned media.
And if you were going to go public one day, then that's all you have to differentiate yourself. Okay.
And you can't actually advertise in our sector at that time. You weren't even allowed to make T-shirts. And so I would say a lot of this stuff is, like, part of the reason I'm here is the university we went to had a journalism school. Mm-hmm. And when I was doing that student council thing you referenced earlier, the journalism students had to generate each week a print, radio, and TV segment. And I was on one week, I think, every TV and radio segment. And I concluded by the end of my year being student council president, I learned what a lawyer was. I would never be a lawyer. I had to work all the time to get paid. And I would never be a journalist, because if you didn't produce something, you could get fired because there's this deadline thing. And so I was able to delete a lot of potential things I might be because they didn't fit with my work mode. But they trained you, right? They made you actually understand that it's a tough job. And if I don't actually give them something interesting and different, I did a bad job for them and they're not coming back.
Got it.
And so when we launched and we're in that chocolate factory, man, we worked that hard. Like when Al Jazeera called me and said, we would like to come see Canada's marijuana company, I didn't have the heart to tell them there might be others. I just brought them in, we showed them Canada's marijuana plant, and when The Economist said, can we come by in their lovely British accent, the answer is, of course, yes. New York Times. All of them keep coming by.
And that all paid dividends because you were the most Google searched, you were the easiest. I remember driving on a highway or driving by a billboard where Tweed, one of your brands, was answering questions. Like, how many times can I go to the website? Or these, and I'm sure they're all real questions because they're just that kind of silly.
Well, so part of what we want to do is be approachable, which means you have to get people to know your name and think about you. So up until October 17th, where we could brand bill but not advertise, which meant we couldn't say THC or CBD, but we could say stuff like, when legalization happens, will it be like gelato where I get to try some before I buy? Tweed for answers. And so we had tons of traffic, which really just turns into brand reputation. What's turned into, though, is interestingly, surprisingly, people now want to go to a Tweed store. And they more associate our product with the point of purchase than they do with what they purchase.
Now, you have points of purchase in a number of jurisdictions. I just had someone tell me about the Winnipeg store.
Yeah, and so what happens is people might put an online review saying, I didn't like XYZ from some vendor, because we don't just sell our own. But I love the Tweed store. I love the Tokyo Smoke. The people knew what they're talking about. The layout was great. It was like Apple for weed, blah, blah. And so what happens is that brand affinity with the location means they're coming back.
Happy experience.
Right. So if you try to sell them a single instance of a product versus an experience in a store where they feel, I'm really comfortable here. I really can trust what I'm getting told. So now we've put the torque on. It's all about the store. It's all about the training. It's all about the experience, because that way they come back, and even if they didn't like what they got the first time, they'll be back and back and back and back, and it works.
Now, we've talked about the first sale, we talked about the plant, we talked about a lot of these high points. I would be reluctant if I didn't ask you to share with us some of the not so high points, some of the not so nice moments. I know in any young startup life, there's always a cash crunch, and there's always a, can I make payroll, and can I keep my house, and this and this. You went all out, and I know directly, you put a lot of yourself at risk.
Yep.
So share with us the downsides that people don't know about.
Yeah, so I like each time I do a business, I like to start a business, but I have a bunch of people who come around and I say, you can be in charge of that, you're in charge of that, and I share very generally, and I don't try to grab it all. If you're going to do that, you got to be very thoughtful, and I'm not. I'm become very thoughtful. So in this one, basically, I had to fire a whole bunch of people
because you had given them opportunities.
Yeah. But if I'm in charge of money, marketing, and image, if you spend all the money and the result is we're not going to have the output we said we would, it becomes my problem. Mm-hmm. And I fix my problems faster now, which is I fire you. Right. So that was a terrible beginning part because you have to blow up people when there's...
Well, let's be very specific. I don't have to name names, but you're talking about significant members of your team.
Oh, yeah. Like, hi, you used to have the best office. You now have no office now. That's the kind of stuff. And so that takes energy when you don't want to use it that way. So those are tough times. We had on at least 2, arguably 3 occasions where, by accounting standards, we were insolvent.
Yeah, but thank God we're not all accountants.
Yeah, right, but you know what I mean? Like
I know what you mean firsthand.
So the solution to being insolvent is before anybody makes you officially insolvent, you have to raise more money.
Absolutely.
So there's a bit of pressure on those ones. And those are, usually you mentioned some awards I get. You should really get awards for things that didn't happen. Here's an award for it not going bankrupt. Here's an award for not losing your license on these things. And so, we had those things. We had personnel, you had capital. We had massive delays time and again. So when was product going to be ready? Well, that's a big question to answer when you don't really know when's the construction going to be done. What are the genetics like? And so all of a sudden,
when's the government going to sign off?
Well, instead of being April 1, it's December 7th. When the company is 2 years old or 3 years old, that kind of miss is gigantic. There's been now, other challenges when you start getting in a field which is actually interesting and successful, and you're generating, some real kind of capital gains. It attracts a crowd that would like to get rich without working.
Which is not the entrepreneurial
right,
way.
And so that's a wholly different beast, right? Those are the people which, there are some range of 7 to 25 sins, depends who you ask, but greed makes every list. Greed is the ugliest, because greed is one of those things that comes in these circumstances, and greed doesn't mind if you rip off aunts or uncles to get money. I mean, it's just stock market, they should know better. Mm-hmm. You can justify anything. And greed, kind of people who are really greedy have this entitlement perspective, and a lot of times it's based on the idea that they actually think they're superior and their IQ is better. And so right off the bat, those aren't really nice symptoms of a good person either. And so I would say that, what you have to do is look for the good in the people who've worked hard to make money, but the number of vultures which have an appetite for greed that circle active areas, I wouldn't say there's been, in the last 10 years or 12 years, there's been a thing called the internet.
I've heard of this thing.
And that caused a whole bunch of greed vultures to come up with fake things so they could grab money. There was a really brief hit of it on, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin stuff, but that was done. And
some short sellers in the public market for cannabis have claimed that that's what's going on in some cases.
Oh, for sure. I think what you're going to find in 2019, in 2020, honest to God, if you were a baboon that threw darts, you couldn't lose money in the sector. Just everything was good, better. 2019 is going to be a bunch of people picking those which are very likely to succeed in order to avoid those that fail.
Well, I keep saying we haven't even had a quarter post-legalization where people are going to have to finally show how much it costs to make their stuff and how much they're losing and how much they're moving forward. How, with all of this pressure, including the pressure of being a publicly traded company, have you managed to avoid those pitfalls, those pit holes, whether that be the iBankers who want to do these deals or the people who want to sell you this or that? You've maintained a fairly clean entity that has held itself to a very high standard in a market that was not believed that was the general standard.
Well, I think everybody understands that's joined and is still in the company that there isn't a finish line with this.
No.
This is a build it, keep building it, and somebody someday we got to hand it to. But there's no we're done.
Yeah, there's succession planning, not
so. This is like this is intended to be a proud business, a real business. And when you're actually exiting prohibition, you can't. You have to meet a doubly high standard, and so people get it. And in our place, if you want to check the stock price, great, but it'll just give you some form of anxiety or false euphoria. And so I think for the most part, people get this as an actual generational business. And
so does that mean you don't check the price daily?
I get, you know what, I get more emails. I know what's going on because somebody will be like, you should put a press release out there, stock's going down, or wow, we're worth an extra $1 billion. I always check at the end of the day, but I don't think it's a good thing to be checking during the day. What are you using it for? So, you know, it is what it is.
Now, we talked a little bit about the demanding schedule that you keep. You're a traveler, a business person, you have international dealings. I know you have Australia and Europe and a bunch of these things. How has that been on the family?
Well, so the issue for my family is they've never known better. So I started working in tech. If you're in tech, you're from Canada, but you do no business in Canada. The first startup I did, a bunch of us kicked that thing off.
Is Web Hanser? Or is
no,
this
Crosskeys.
Crosskeys.
So that one, I think we did more business with Chevron Nigeria for quite a few years than we did in all of Canada.
So you're always on the road.
Right. This one's not bad. I would say the difference on travel, there's, if you can travel and return home and have a box of time, that's easier. What I'd say is this one going from like me to like 2,800 people, from one site to 10 in the country, from one country to 12, 32 acquisitions, 16 rounds of finance to raise $6.5 billion. There hasn't been a lot of time where there was, I don't think I need to think about anything. Just gonna relax. So it's a bit of that.
Any concerns?
Well, I think,
I mean, you are building wealth for your family and for the kids, but if you're not there.
I think what happens is you can be physically there, but not fully mentally there at times. But I think that the harder part is, and this is to all your viewers who are young, what starts to happen is you get older and do business. You start to get a little harder, a little harsher, a little bit more like...
rough around the edges.
Yeah, you go, no, I've seen this. This is actually going to lead to bullshit. We're not doing that.
We're out of this.
And so what you got to do is not get there. So like what I got to do a lot of the time is just let it go for a bit and not, because, you know, if you can see it coming a mile away, 9 times out of 10, it's exactly what you see coming.
So you just prepare for it.
But, you know, I think as I've gotten older, part of the thing is I'm kind of like, I think most people would describe me as having a pretty good intensity energy. But I think I've become a little bit more harsh than I like.
Now, you've had your eye on the Google, Amazon, like goal. You don't want to build a small company. No. You're not going to do all of this. You want to bring our country and this company to a global leadership position.
Yeah.
What do you think will get it there?
Well, I think we're well on the track, right? Because what you got to do is have global standards and regulations of which you're the leader in. And because they started in Canada, the best rules are here. They're becoming the best rules everywhere. Which means if you're the best operator,
they're getting adopted now.
Sure. So all of a sudden, if you have operated for the longest time in the high-level jurisdiction, and you are the most competent complier in those, you have the best opportunity to be licensed to other jurisdictions. And if you don't believe it, like, I don't know, go buy a rail car, a jet engine, you know, anything. What they don't do is ask anybody in the world, hey, do you feel like trying? They say, who's the most competent? And so your probability of licenses increases, which means then if you execute, you can win. But then you got to build quality products, and so we're doing a ton of work on actually creating products, not just dry bud. And then you put brands on those products, whether medical or rec. And all of a sudden you have intellectual property, trademarks, governance capacity, and those are kind of the layers that create value. And if you've got enough capital behind that, you just plow it through. And so I think we're in a good spot by that. But the models you referenced didn't immediately try to become profitable. Profits are short-term results that have to be continued once you begin. But if instead what you can actually have is an ambition that people buy into, you don't have to generate a profit. And Amazon, like, look at the earnings. If you look at the earnings per share at AWS, has gone through the roof for usership, but the profits are sometimes on and off. Market cap's gone way up. What are they're saying is world's adopted you. If world adopts us, then we win.
What do you think will be the result of the world adoption? Will we end up with Canada's normal oligopoly and use those strong companies to have a presence in the world? Or will we just be another branch factory of our southern neighbors?
So I don't think we'll be a branch factory of the southern neighbors, but I could see us being a branch factory of Europe, right? Because we got 36 million people, they got 500 million people, and even if we're the best and we export everything there, over time they have a much larger market, which will start, we'll be wagged. But, you know, get over it. the reality is we'll have created tons of intellectual property, which will still have a home base here. Tons of wealth. Some, like the last time we did anything that was super interesting was probably invent the phone. It's not like
most famous that in hockey,
right? It's not like this will be an iconic achievement.
I think it will. The Canada Arm, some of our the BlackBerry.
Yeah, you and me use the Canada Arm all the time. Come on, this is.
But I'm proud of it.
I am too, but that's because they told us to be proud of it. I don't even know if there's a guy on the moon, right? What was that last guy that said the basketball guy? I wonder whether there's a guy on the moon. I think marijuana is a globally existing thing, and the question is, if you can reroute it, you got basically $500 billion every year of addressable market.
Just get it out of the black market and into the white market.
The illicit's the issue, and the potential is an unknown.
For sure. Let's share some advice. Let's share some advice with our younger viewers who haven't got your experience, who haven't had many real-world opportunities. What sort of things would you warn them against at their stage when they're still undergrads?
I'd say 49% of everything I've ever tried has not worked out well. So you keep trying. And if you're above 51, that's good. And so I had one of the bankers in Toronto, he goes, man, I've known you for 20 years. I've helped you on deals. I always knew there was something was going to happen. But I was starting to wonder when the big one was going to hit. And it's you just got to keep trying shit. The idea that I'm going to give myself 3 years to try a plan, that's right off the bat a terrible idea.
Yeah, but you've had entrepreneurial success before.
Oh, yeah,
not at this level.
Not at this level, but you know what? You just can't give yourself, this will be my one try.
No, I
want to give myself 3 years. I'm going to get a job so I can live that normal. No. What you got to do is just say, the biggest risk in life is having a job. And the reason is somebody else can fire you. So if you don't like that risk profile, figure out a way to create your own thing, because the only way it doesn't work is if you don't work. Just get it in your head the right way. Somebody else being able to fire you, that's a weird situation. They're planning, and you don't even know. You're not aware.
You're not even in the room.
You're bringing your lunch bag to work, thinking everything's great. I got a job, and you got fired. That can't happen if you create your own thing.
Create your own thing.
Yeah. Diminish risk. Create your own thing.
Final words of advice.
People are attracted to optimism and effort and integrity. There's no shortage of money. There's no shortage of options to pursue things. But if you don't have a really positive effort, really good integrity, or really bring it every day, the ones you're going to attract to be with you, you don't want. So just, kind of keep your core focused. Don't get lost on this idea that it's actually about money. It happens. It comes out when you do it right.
Well, you're obviously doing something right, and you've done something right by coming to talk to us today. Bruce, thanks so much.
Good to be here, man. Thanks.
Nice to see you. I'm Dr. Sean Wise. Thanks for watching The Naked Entrepreneur.